title seems a bit strange after having had so many demonstrations of the intelligence of people. And still, yesterday, while we were listening to Jeff Stas, we heard that people are dumb. They're not red monkeys, they're 2Ds, they don't get it. This question, do intelligent questions create intelligent crowd, is then the question, can we solve that by intelligent questions? Before I go into that, I just want to very briefly, you heard who we are. We've been in this place for 10 years. We work mainly for big corporates and civil society, and we help them to crowdsource dialogues to basically transform and get the best ideas up to better and faster implement. At this stage, there should be a little video coming. I'm not sure. Yeah.
You have a responsibility to steer your organization, but without knowing what people are really thinking, how can you take the right actions? It's like flying blind. Wouldn't it be great to have some honest feedback straight from the source that gave you the full picture and helped you make the right decisions? Synthetron does this for you by capturing the most important authentic opinions and ideas of the people that matter to your organization via a process we call evolutionary crowdsourcing. Participants discuss your key subjects in a real-time conversation from the comfort of their own computers or tablets. It's as easy for them as sending an instant message or a text. We know how to get the best feedback and ideas out of a social brainstorm, and you need to include everybody who matters. Of course, lots of people generate lots of ideas and opinions, so how do you pick out the best and most useful from all the noise? Synthetron brings together up to 1,000 participants in small overlapping groups, all contributing their best ideas and most honest opinions in a safe, anonymous environment. Ideas are filtered by the participants themselves when they rank each other's comments. Synthetron uses a clever algorithm behind the scenes to allow ideas that get support in their initial group to be seen by more people. That's the moment when the statement becomes a synthetron. The stronger comments and ideas spread to a bigger audience and gather momentum, just like a really funny joke quickly spreads between friends. The conversation is done in an hour, and what do you get at the end of it? You get a short list of the strongest ideas and opinions, something that will get you thinking straight away. You also get a longer list of all the synthetrons so you can see the whole span of the conversation, and a deeper analysis of the whole discussion to turn the insights into actions. Synthetron will help you listen to your audience, engage with their thoughts and opinions, and gain feedback that enables you to make the right decisions. Synthetron, crowdsourcing insightful actions.
Thank you. Now, we've been doing this for over 10 years, many countries, many companies, so we clearly believe in this intelligence of the crowd, and especially applied in corporate. Just a quick question, because it's like, who of you think that crowds are intelligent? Raise your hands. I'm preaching to the convicted almost, it looks like. I would say yes too, and it's deeply rooted in, I just clicked this. I would say yes too, because it's deeply rooted in our DNA. And it goes back to Socrates. I call him the godmother of crowdsourcing. He is the one who taught us that actually if you ask questions, intelligence is there. So intelligence is related to questions, and there's a whole methodology about how you ask these questions. And the other part, which we call the godfather of crowdsourcing, is Aristotle, who just told us that, if there is a lot of people together and they have complementary ideas, the whole will get a more insightful about intelligence than every single persons apart, as long as a dialogue. Now, crowdsourcing has been there for ages in the past, and probably just a little story here. In 1700, the UK Armada lost 4 of his ships on the way back to England because they couldn't calculate the longitude very well. And this was just off the shores of England, this little tip to the south. And then Parliament made an act in England to, which they called the longitude prize. And they asked everyone in the world to invent this, a bit like your medical story. And there were many people coming up for ages, and the one person that actually solved the problem was a clockmaker. Nothing to do with marine, nothing to do with the army, nothing to do with anything of the classical things. Now, Parliament did this that seriously that even Newton was in the committee to approve or disapprove whether this was right. It's in our DNA, but it's just come up lately because digitalization allowed crowds to connect in a different way. And we had two people who actually brought this crowdsourcing up to the scene. One is Jeff Ho, who said, hey, crowd and outsourcing is crowdsourcing. There's a whole new source there for companies and organizations. And the other one, which is Surowiki, who just said, crowds and the right conditions is intelligence. And I'll come back to that because that's Surowiki did most of his research in his book on quantitative intelligence, the capacity for a crowd to estimate things. And it's almost statistically, the bigger the crowd, the better estimation you have. So why this question? Because there are many things that can go wrong. And if you look a bit at the latest literature and books that are coming up, all of them start with a big chapter saying these things can go wrong. And if you look at it, what is it that go wrong? There are different elements. One, and it's a big favorite of mine, it's Daniel Kahneman, who just developed this book, which is called Slow Thinking, Fast Thinking. He's actually a psychologist who got the Nobel Prize of Economics. So you see already there's the link there. And his book basically says, in our mind, there are two minds. There's a fast one, he calls the reflex mind. It goes very fast and it automatically takes over and decides. And there's a slow mind, which is actually more reflective. And that's where you do the abstract thinking and the intelligence. And if you don't be careful, your fast mind will take over, and it will take over for the wrong things. That's one of the big pitfalls, which, if you look at the literature and at what's going on, there are, I think, about 50 or 30 names for biases. And now we all know that people and crowds can be biased. Anchoring bias, so it's a beauty bias. If somebody is beautiful, you would think they're more clever than somebody who would say exactly the same thing and it's not beautiful. If your name starts with a C, most likely you're going to prefer Coca-Cola much more than the average other people whose name starts with an A. It's these things that are actually all being discovered and being named, and many, many names around that. Worse is if it comes down to groups. Groups are known to amplify these biases. So there we are. Lots of biases, and groups amplify biases. And we all know, do you know the story about the lemmings? Who of you knows the story about the lemmings? Exactly, which one? The story says, lemmings go and follow stupidly falling off the cliff. Now, this in itself is a bias, because it's not true. It's a film made by Walt Disney, where they push the little animals off the cliff. And the common knowledge is, lemmings are stupid. They just all fall off the cliff, following one on each other. But groupthink is basically a result of a few things. It's one, the incorrect information. You have somewhere an oral information, probably about the lemming story, and do not know the scientific information about it. Reputation pressure, because you feel you want to conform. If 70% would say, I know the lemming story, probably a few others will raise their hands because you want to conform type of thing. And the lack of critical thinking, just saying, is this true? And very importantly, you can be totally incompetent, do not have the knowledge about it, or inexperienced. So, can intelligent questions create intelligent crowds? The answer is yes, they can, if, and there are a couple of ifs. There are 4 ifs actually that actually matter. And the first one is you have to have the right crowd. if you, that's why my Aristotle was important. I'm just going to explain you this graph. If you look at the graph and you look at it, knowledge and information which is common or different. And on that side, you have experience, which is common or different. Now, I ask you all to say, what was your experience of your last conference in Lisbon? You don't have the knowledge probably and experience without the professor who is here. So you have to just make sure that you're not falling into the chit-chat trap where you're asking something to a crowd that doesn't have any common knowledge or any knowledge, and any experience. And that means that you have to think about what is the potential of the crowd you're going to ask things. Or if you are in that crowd, for example, we did crowdsource discussions on the energy team for the day 4. We did 2 ones, one with experts and one with the so-called crowd. With the experts, we asked them questions which were in this knowledge part about their view on the development of an energy, crowd energy market. When we did it with the crowd, it wasn't actually a big crowd because something went wrong with the communication from Crowdsource Weekly on the timing. But if we asked it to the crowd, we asked them on their experience. You go back to, hey, how do you experience your energy? Because how do you experience? So you have to think about this very carefully. So you can, but then there's something you can actually, the crowd is important, but you need to be able to reach it, recruit it, engage it, and reward if appropriate. Very important you think about that beforehand. Now, other to having the right crowd, you need to have the right process. And this is where Surowiecki mainly focused on and saying, you need to have a decentralized crowd, it should be independent thinking, should be smart aggregation, an open access to information, diversity plays a role. All true. It's not the last. But I think there is something much more important, and that's our belief, is that insights, intelligence, think about yourself. You don't get intelligence just like that. You get intelligence because you're triggered. You get intelligence mostly out of dialogues. And in dialogues, you need to have this dialogue protocol of listening, trusting the other party, having a purpose and common purpose, and feeling free from repetition pressure. For us, that means that we think that there's an incredible value in anonymity, in a safe space, in a dialogue on crowdsourcing. I heard earlier on today where we talked about the Italian mobility and things that you have for good many forces. I haven't seen anything going really wrong with anonymity. I believe that when you have a crowd with a common purpose, with anonymity, you free up a lot of the biases we talked about before, and you allow real intelligence to go on. But the Eureka idea actually needs space. So you need to create the right circumstances, you need to create a dialogue, and you need to create space. And here you go back to this slow thinking. Now, for example, when we do, we often do it when a company has a strategy and is about to say, well, I want to actually start and communicate this strategy, and I want to just test it a little bit with what we call a canary panel. We then set it up such that the manager explains the strategy to 30, 40 people that are from all kind of ranks in the organization. They spend some time on mood boards with it. They emotionally engage and translate the discussion in small workshops with them. And the next day, we crowdsource their feedback. And what do we do with that? Is that we allow them to slow think overnight. And we've seen cases where when the presentation was given, everybody was very positive, and the next day it was significantly more critical and constructive. And we saw cases where the presentation was given and there was a lot of negative and cynicism in the room. And the next day, actually, that didn't seem to be the crowd's opinion, but a groupthink effect about a few people in workshops that actually were very cynical. So it's very important that you think about the slow thinking time as well in this. And so you have the right crowd, you have the right process, now get the right question. Getting the question right is, first of all, something about purpose. And I took this picture. I lived in Bruges for a while, and there's a beautiful painting of an anatomy class there, but it doesn't exist in high resolution. So here I have Rembrandt for you. But luckily, maybe for you, because the Bruges picture is about the belly being opened, and you see all the intestines and everything. Now, what does it say, this picture and that picture, is that the purpose of the whole anatomy was different. One is the hand, one is the tummy. If you ask a question, the first thing is, what do you want to get out of it? What are you looking for? What's intelligence is useful? So having an objective is the very first thing. Then the second thing is, construct it well. I'm taking these because they were the example, and I expected some of you to participate in this thing. But if you look at that question, it has a build-up of, and this is going back to your grammar classes almost of high school or primary school probably, but it's very important to think about subject matter. What is your action verb? What's your objective? What are the constraints and the references there? And I come back here with a few examples, because if you don't do that, you get ambiguous questions. This could be a question to you. Do you expect the crowdsourced energy market to take off? My question to you, raise your hands. Do you expect it to take off? A few hands raise it. You don't know my question. Because take off means what? To account for more than 30% of the energy supply? Maybe your hand will not be raised. Over the next 5 years, you may consider your answer in your own country. What I'm actually showing here is that if you don't get clear questions, you get very funny answers. And that's, in crowdsourcing, a condition sine qua non. This is actually thanks to a colleague of mine who sent it from Paris the other day. Questions and my reflex brain and my reflecting brain. I'm giving you here a few examples so that you just feel what the difference is between a good question and not. How satisfied are you about Crowdsource Weekly? If you ask that question now, you will probably translate it in your head to say, well, how much do I like it? And that's your quick reflex brain answering. But I didn't ask like, I asked satisfied. What was good about Crowdsource Weekly? Well, probably you think like, when was I awake? What was the presentation that I liked? What was really good about Crowdsource Weekly? Aha, you now have to start classifying. What did you learn at Crowdsource Weekly? Oof. Not only classifying, you have to actually start ordering, compare with what you know. And what will you do differently after Crowdsource Weekly? Well, now I have to do transfer and apply this thinking. I'm just doing this because you are, with a question, you either trigger this fast brain or this slow brain in very different ways. And asking the right question is an art, and it's something I would say we spend a lot of time on. Now, that's the construct of the question, just like how you structure it. But the question needs to engage in a common purpose. If you ask a crowd a question, and it doesn't feel somewhere a common purpose or a common understanding or a picture where it's leading to, why would they bother answering? You need to be able to engage them. That's very, very important. And then you need to have impact. You think about the impact of your question and ask powerful questions. And this question, I think, is one of the most powerful we didn't develop it, but we were part of that project. This is a German foreign minister who took responsibility 2 years ago, and I said, I want to know. And what was his question? I don't know for whom of you know German here, but the question basically is, what is wrong about German foreign policy? Now, this is the minister asking it. The moment he asked it, he actually opened the floor for all kind of critical thinking, reflective thinking. It's a very powerful question if you get that. And so it's not only says what is wrong, if anything is wrong, and what should be changed. Now, we actually used that question with him to get all his embassy personnel from all over the world involved in answering the same question. He did it with experts, he did it with his own political arena, and he did it with citizens, he did it with his own personnel, and that's where we crowdsourced with him around that question. Now, questions, the impact of questions need to be triggering. And this is just the other day, it's a French client of us who said, well, I want to ask these questions. Well, let's go and do a project. These are the questions I have. That's what I want to ask. And I said, what is engagement for you as employees? Are you going to answer that when you get that question? Probably not. So just to tell you the difference is what gets you out of bed in the morning to come to work. That's something you probably answer. Think back when you had a really good day at work last month. What triggered this? That's what you're probably going to answer. So there you feel valued, and it's actually, you're touching the head, the heart, and the practical stuff. You're touching slow and fast thinking, and that's what you have to really think about. And then finally, sometimes you really have to ensure that the question is out of the box. I just put this one here, but it's sometimes you need to liberate the thinking and say, if you were the CEO, what would you do differently? A lot of the creative questions are in this arena as well. It's imagine you're the client, imagine you're this. It's extremely important. So I asked about the question, the structure of the question, the impact of the question. The third one is actually the flow of the question, because with one question, you don't have necessarily the answer. You need to really, when you listen and look and work with a crowd, spend your time to make sure that the crowd gets into the topic, warm up, is divergent in finding the different elements and explore different solutions or feedbacks, and at the end converges. And why? You need to also think about the energy level. It's like, do I keep them motivating and energized? And why is this so important is especially that you converge at the end. We've seen that when we do, and we did this a project with Shell where we did they were introducing a very big SAP project, and it was like SAP number 2, and we did with all the countries that were going through this project, Synthetron discussions, and we always asked them in the beginning, well, how do you look at this SAP project from, totally resistant to fully engaged? And then we asked them to share their fears and their hopes and what they think would make the project really go well, and get into saying, okay, what are the things we need to do first? So you go from this divergence to convergence. And at the end, we asked them again and said, well, how do you feel about this project? And mind you, we asked feel, not think. And you will see systematically 20% uplift in engagement. And we see this also in the way people talk. So when you're doing crowdsourcing, when you are asking patients to share their ideas, you're doing an intervention. These patients, their life changed, their ideas are going all over the world, or you're not just sourcing as though nothing is happening. It's like mining. You get something out, but something has changed over there. And I'm going to go through that well. And lastly, so we had the first three. The fourth point is actually the right attitude. Crowdsourcing, I talked about the impact you have on crowds. We've learned that really right from the beginning, at the moment of recruitment, it's extremely important what attitude you show. And the attitude, there is this little book, Humble Inquiry, which is fantastic. It's 20 pages. It says a lot about that from Shine. But fundamentally, when you crowdsource, you can't look at the crowd as objects, as something you extract from. People are people. You need to respect them as subjects. You need to respect that they have an intelligence and that you're looking for that. And that is actually in your tone of your voice, it's the way you engage them, it's on the right questions, it's on respecting afterwards the results, making sure you do a follow-up on that. So crowdsourcing is an intervention. I'm not sure the timing there, but it's all right. So back to my question. Do intelligence questions create intelligence crowd? Yes, they can, and I've showed you it's actually deeply rooted in our DNA. There's a lot of biases and pitfalls you need to prevent. There's an incredible potential in crowds, and we've seen this all over again. Whenever we do this, the results are always surprising. There's always something new that people didn't know. There's always something more important than the other that people didn't know. And we've done this, if you look at the horse, the Belgian companies on there are our clients, and they have changed their strategy, they have changed their plans, basically because they were listening to employees and they were hearing something they didn't know was so important. Strong belief that intelligence comes through dialogue, getting the right questions, the right flow, and demonstrate respect. So I think that's there. There's an incredible intelligence. Jeanette, my colleague, said it already during the workshop. It's still very underexploited within organizations, within society. You get now people saying we need to involve the citizens. You get managers starting to listen. There's a lot of intelligence there which is not captured, and I think that's part of the movement we're part of. So thank you for your attention.